I used to dread Thanksgiving the way some people dread the dentist, except with more stuffing and less anesthesia. While friends posted happy snapshots of pumpkin pie and matching sweaters, my version of the holiday felt like walking barefoot across broken glass, smiling politely through the pain, trying not to bleed in front of everyone. My parents' home in Seattle was grand in the way only old money tries not to be. Warm wood tones, a roaring fireplace, heirloom china from my grandmother's collection. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting, but if you tilted the frame just slightly, you'd see the cracks beneath the varnish. The worst part? I never saw it coming. The roast always started off slowly, gentle jabs hidden beneath smiles and cranberry sauce. But before long, it would escalate into the annual humiliation, me at the center of it. A degree in digital anthropology. Uncle Greg would inevitably begin every year like clockwork. He was a finance guy, the kind who thought anything that didn't end in ROI was witchcraft. He'd spear a piece of ham dramatically and grin across the table. So, do you like study caveman memes? Stone Age TikTok. The laughter was never delayed. Aunt Lisa would cover her mouth with her napkin like she was trying to be polite, but her shoulders shook from the effort of suppressing a full cackle. My cousins would exchange smirks. Even my brother, Alex, who usually stayed out of it, wouldn't meet my eyes. I learned, over time, not to try and explain myself. The first few times I did, I talked about how digital anthropology was about understanding human behavior in virtual spaces, how online communities were shaping real-world politics, identity, and connection. But the more I talked, the more vacant their eyes became, like I was speaking a language they'd already decided was beneath them. And then came my father's sigh, the final punctuation mark. Charles Whittaker didn't need to say much. The way he looked at me said enough. A man who'd spent 30 years building Harper and Reed Industries from a garage operation into a regional powerhouse didn't believe in ideas you couldn't touch with your hands. To him, success looked like metal, logistics, and bottom lines. He had no patience for my world of data patterns, social nuance, and remote collaboration. My mother would occasionally try to soften the blows, but it always came out worse. "You know we just worry, honey," she said once over dessert, tapping my hand with hers. "You're so smart. If only you'd gone into law, like Eric. He just made partner, you know." Yes, we all knew. I was 25 then, barely out of grad school, living in a cramped apartment in the Bay Area, surviving off ramen and grant-funded research gigs. But my mind was on fire, alive with possibilities. I was sketching out ideas for a platform that could measure emotional resonance in virtual teams, trying to build something no one had dared to try yet. But to them, I was just Danielle, the disappointment, the punchline. It wasn't just the mockery that stung, it was the dismissal. The way they didn't even ask. Didn't want to know what drove me, what I dreamed of. I could have brought a working prototype into the room, and they still would have passed the gravy first. They didn't hate me, but they didn't see me either. And that, somehow, hurt even more. I didn't argue with them at those holiday dinners. Not once. I let them laugh. Let them whisper in the kitchen while pouring second glasses of wine. Let them believe I was wasting my potential, because I knew if I fought back too early, it would only feed their certainty that I was defensive because I had nothing to show. So I swallowed their condescension like it was medicine, and I went back to San Francisco with fire in my chest and not a single coin to my name. My life then was far from the glossy sheen of tech success that people imagine when they hear the word startup. I lived in a shoebox of an apartment with my college roommate, Amanda, who worked nights as a server and days on her painting commissions. We alternated shifts on the futon, shared a Wi-Fi password with the neighbors below us, and learned how to stretch every dollar of our Trader Joe's budget like it was a magic trick. And I worked. God, did I work. 4 hours of sleep was a luxury. Most nights, I'd crash with my laptop still warm on my stomach, lines of code bleeding into dreams I barely remembered. I sustained myself on caffeine, ramen, and the absolute refusal to let their voices, their laughter, be right about me. That's when Maya came into the picture. She had been a TA in one of my grad seminars, brilliant and blunt, and equally tired of watching smart people build apps for scheduling laundry pickups and delivering oat milk faster. We'd meet in late-night diners, scribbling on napkins, mapping out something we hadn't seen anyone else even try. What if we could feel the heartbeat of a remote team? What if we could decode emotional friction before it turned into burnout or churn? What if people weren't just project contributors on a spreadsheet, but actual human systems with moods, rhythms, and needs? We called it PulseSync, our answer to the emotional emptiness of digital workspaces, a platform that read between the lines of Slack, Teams, Zoom, detecting emotional drift, signaling when a team was losing cohesion, surfacing tension points, and even suggesting moments for virtual recognition or check-ins. It was abstract, experimental, and completely alien to the VCs we pitched. I'll never forget the guy in the crisp blue suit, tapping his Montblanc pen against his notepad, eyebrows practically climbing into his hairline. "You want to measure feelings?" he said, barely masking the smirk. "Through chat logs? You should probably pivot to wellness apps or meditation bots. That's where the real money is." They laughed us out of the room, but we kept building. We burned through small grants, maxed out personal credit cards, worked freelance gigs just to afford 8 AVOS storage for the data models. There were weeks we didn't speak to anyone outside our own bubble, days where everything crashed and we had to start again from scratch. Then the tide shifted. In late 2021, the headlines changed. The Great Resignation. Employees are quitting in record numbers. Burnout epidemic in remote teams. And suddenly, companies weren't laughing anymore. Our beta testers were HR leads desperate to stop the bleeding. They didn't care how weird our concept was. They just needed something that worked. We signed our first pilot contract in April 2022, a mid-sized tech firm out of Chicago. Then another in May. By June, we had 10. We weren't a joke anymore. We were something they didn't have a name for yet, but desperately needed. And for the first time since I walked out of grad school, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, the silence I gave them at those dinners was the smartest response I ever made. I was 27 when the email arrived. I was buried in onboarding documents for a new client in Berlin when Maya forwarded it to me with a single word in the subject line. Seriously? I clicked it, expecting some cold call vendor trying to upsell us AI integration. But when I read the sender, I stopped breathing for a full 10 seconds. Subject: acquisition interest. From Harper & Reed Industries, my father's company, the same Harper & Reed that had served as the gold standard of traditional manufacturing for 3 decades. The same Harper & Reed that used to brag about 0 remote workers as a point of pride. That prided itself on boots-on-the-floor culture and saw digital transformation as a buzzword for people who didn't want to work hard. And now they were reaching out to us, to PulseSync. I scrolled down. It wasn't a mistake. They wanted to explore an acquisition, not just a service contract, but an internal integration that would effectively replace their legacy HR systems with our emotional mapping platform. They cited high turnover, employee disengagement, and internal communication strain. It would have been funny if it didn't hit so hard. They didn't know I was the founder. The name on the email was addressed to our corporate inbox, attention to partnerships. They had no idea that the girl they laughed at every Thanksgiving had built the very thing they were now desperate to buy into. My first instinct was to delete it. My second was to laugh. But my third? That one was ice cold. "Let's take the meeting," I told Mia. When we arrived, I wore my sharpest navy suit, tailored, understated, commanding. My hair pulled back, no distractions. My CTO, Jordan, and our head of product, Priya, flanked me like a wall. I wasn't the girl trying to explain her ideas over pie anymore. I was the CEO of a company they didn't even realize they needed. We entered their corporate boardroom on the 23rd floor of their downtown Seattle headquarters, mahogany paneling, leather chairs, a skyline view meant to intimidate. My father sat at the end of the table. He didn't recognize me at first. He was glancing at Jordan's laptop when his eyes finally found me and froze. His face changed instantly, not with pride, not with shame even, but something rawer, something uncertain. He looked like a man watching the floor shift beneath his feet. "Danielle?" His voice cracked, just slightly. I didn't blink. Mr. Whitaker, I said evenly, extending my hand like I would to any other executive. Thank you for having us. He didn't take my hand right away. Then, as if realizing everyone was watching, he stood and gave it a quick shake, like I was someone else's daughter. I launched into the deck without missing a beat. Mia had trained me well. Open strong, lead with data, show the pain points before they ask. PulseSync's platform was already proving itself across multiple industries, and we had the metrics to back it up. I spoke clearly, clinically, like I've rehearsed for war. No one in that room said a word about my last name. No one dared. They leaned in. They asked smart questions. They looked hungry. And my father? He sat there the entire time, his eyes locked on the presentation, but not really seeing it. He wasn't watching the slides. He was watching me. That was the moment I knew. Everything had changed. The deal closed in early November. It wasn't just a partnership or partial merger. It was a full buyout. PulseSync absorbed Harper and Reed entirely, the infrastructure, the HR database, the strained teams, the dusty legacy systems. We offered generous terms to most of the employees. We didn't believe in tearing down what people had spent decades building. But make no mistake, we were in charge now. The ink on the contracts was barely dry when TechCrunch picked it up. Their headline didn't hold back. Startup led by useless degree grad buys traditional giant. A new era begins. The subtext wasn't lost on anyone. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it. I didn't need to. That December, I flew home to Seattle for Christmas. It was the first time I'd been back since the acquisition. The house looked exactly the same, wreath on the door, cinnamon-scented candles burning by the staircase, that same old snow globe collection lined up on the mantel like a row of memories that refused to evolve. But something had changed. I could feel it the second I stepped inside. No one cracked a joke when I walked in. No one said, "Oh look, it's the family philosopher," or "Did you bring a case study on eggnog dynamics this year?" Instead, there was a strange hush, a stiltedness. Uncle Greg, usually the loudest voice in any room, offered a firm, quiet hello. No quips, no smirks, just a nod. Aunt Lisa, the queen of passive-aggressive compliments, asked if I wanted tea and didn't mention my quirky little projects once. Even my cousins, who normally rolled their eyes at my career, barely looked up from their phones. Dinner was peaceful, too peaceful. The conversation stuck to the weather, football, the neighbor's new dog, the kind of safe, shallow topics families use when there's a giant, unspoken truth hanging in the air like fog. I watched them dance around it like it wasn't there, like I wasn't there. My mother didn't ask about law school, didn't bring up Eric's latest court victory. She served the roast, asked how my flight was, and nothing more. Her smile looked painted on, fragile, like one wrong word would crack it. And my father? He barely said a thing all evening. He carved the ham in clean, methodical slices, passed the dishes down the table, didn't meet my eyes until dessert. The silence spoke volumes, but I wasn't going to fill it for them. I let them sit in it. Let them feel the weight of every past insult echo in their minds, now reframed and reshaped by the very headline they couldn't escape. The useless degree had bought the table we were now eating at. Then, as plates were cleared and someone reached for the wine, my father stood. He didn't tap his glass or raise his voice. He simply lifted his drink, scotch, of course, neat, and said, "To Danielle." The air in the room crystallized. Time seemed to pause. No one moved. Then, after a moment, he added, "I was wrong. We all were." I didn't raise my glass, didn't smile, didn't respond. I didn't need to. My presence, calm, steady, undeniable, was the response. The girl they mocked had become the woman who'd quietly redefined their reality. And for the first time in years, I felt full. Not from the food, from the silence, from the reckoning. My degree hangs on the wall behind my desk, in a simple black frame. No spotlight, no gold plaque, no unnecessary flourish. Just the parchment, slightly yellowed now, with my name in serifed print, and the words Bachelor of Arts in Digital Anthropology etched underneath. Most visitors assume it's decorative, another academic token meant to impress investors or clients. But to me, that degree is something else entirely. It's not proof of knowledge. It's proof of defiance. Every time I see it, I remember the dinner tables, the snide remarks, the way Uncle Greg would chuckle like I was an amusing detour on the road to real success, the way my mother would sigh and say, "You always were too idealistic for your own good." The way my father looked at me, not with hate, but with quiet, crushing disappointment. That diploma became my anchor, not because it promised a job or a future, but because it reminded me who I was when no one else believed in me. It was the paper they called useless, the one they dismissed, and it became the foundation of everything I built. Today, I'm 28, CEO of Pulse Sync. We have over 80 employees across 3 continents. Our platform is used by companies ranging from hungry startups to Fortune 500 giants. We don't just track performance, we track emotional resonance. We help people feel seen, even through a screen. We give managers tools to listen without waiting for someone to burn out. I've spoken at panels where people quote me. I've had HR leads from companies I once applied to and got rejected from ask if they can pilot our system. We've been profiled in Forbes, Fast Company, and yes, TechCrunch still loves the irony of my origin story. And the same relatives who once laughed, they email me now, politely, cautiously. Cousin Eric forwarded me his startup deck last month, asking if I could take a quick look if you have time. Aunt Liz's friend is trying to get a product into European markets and wonders if I know anyone at Meta. Uncle Greg recently invited me to speak at his alma mater's business roundtable. I help where I can, not out of spite, not to lord anything over them, but because I can. Because I remember what it felt like to be overlooked. I remember what it felt like to have something burning inside me while everyone else dismissed the flame as a flicker. I don't hold grudges, but I don't forget either. Because forgetting would mean erasing the long nights, the ramen dinners, the whispered jokes behind my back, the quiet battles I fought alone in code, in decks, in sleepless strategy calls. No, I remember, and I carry that memory not as a wound, but as armor. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't confrontation. It's quiet competence. It's undeniable success. It's showing up, owning the room, and no longer needing to say a word, because your presence is the proof. And sometimes, the person they told to be quiet ends up owning the company they work for.